In the glittering world of Hollywood, where fame and fortune often collide with controversy, there has always been a fragile line between truth and perception, and in the recent whirlwind surrounding Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, that line has been tested like never before. Before we dive into Justin Baldoni's bold response to the allegations leveled against him by Blake Lively, it is important to understand the calm that existed before the storm, a time when both stars were navigating their careers seemingly without friction, without conflict, and certainly without the glare of a legal spotlight. Justin Baldoni, known to millions for his role in television and his inspirational speaking engagements, had long cultivated an image of compassion, integrity, and thoughtful masculinity. His brand was one of understanding, support, and emotional growth, and many fans admired him for being one of the rare male figures in Hollywood who openly discussed vulnerability. On the other side, Blake Lively was the embodiment of modern stardom, her career built through blockbuster films, fashion influence, and a charismatic presence that captivated audiences on screen and on social media. With her family life publicly celebrated alongside husband Ryan Reynolds, Blake appeared to be someone who could do no wrong. She had supporters in every corner of the entertainment industry and beyond, but beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect image, tensions were beginning to brew slowly, quietly. The roots of disagreement started taking shape, though the exact cause remains the subject of intense speculation. Whispers of behind-the-scenes conflict between Lively and Baldoni began to seep into social circles, tabloids, and digital forums alike. At first, these murmurs were dismissed as standard gossip, the kind that lives in the corners of Hollywood's unpredictable social machine. But that all changed when public statements began to surface, when accusations were not just implied but spoken out loud, and when legal teams started stepping into the frame. Suddenly, what had been vague rumor turned into a storm of headlines, hashtags, and heated conversations. This was no longer a private matter between two Hollywood personalities. It had become a public battle, with emotional, legal, and professional stakes for both sides, and fans around the world were watching. For many observers, the shock came not from the existence of a dispute, but from the people involved. After all, both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni had reputations built not on scandal but on inspiration and positivity. Seeing their names tangled in controversy was jarring, and that shock translated into an immediate media frenzy. Talk shows, YouTube channels, bloggers, influencers, and traditional news outlets began dissecting every available detail, every court filing, every offhand comment, and every social media post. It is within this tense backdrop that Justin Baldoni finally said enough is enough. It was not just a statement, it was a turning point. The moment when silence was no longer an option, when rumors needed to be answered, and when the truth, whatever it may be, had to find a way into the spotlight. The calm had officially ended, and the world was now watching as the details began to surface surrounding the allegations Blake Lively had directed toward Justin Baldoni. And while the initial claims were cloaked in carefully worded statements and vague language, the implications were clear. Blake Lively was suggesting that Baldoni had crossed boundaries that should never be crossed, not just professionally, but ethically and perhaps even legally. At the core of Blake's accusation was the claim that sensitive details from her confidential deposition had been leaked to the media. Without her consent, she never outright named Justin Baldoni in the beginning, but the public and press alike quickly filled in the blanks. This led to widespread speculation that Baldoni, or someone from his legal or professional team, had something to do with the leak. This accusation landed like a thunderbolt in the already stormy skies of this high-profile dispute, because depositions, especially those related to ongoing legal proceedings, are supposed to remain private and confidential. Any violation of that sanctity can dramatically influence the court of public opinion and potentially the courtroom itself. Blake Lively's camp argued that the leak was designed to paint her in a negative light, using selective snippets from her testimony that would raise eyebrows among fans, followers, and legal analysts alike. It was presented as a form of reputational warfare designed not to win in court, but to win in the minds of millions. The reaction was swift, and intense. Social media platforms erupted with divided opinions. Some fans rushed to support Blake, outraged that her privacy could be compromised in such a calculated way. They demanded accountability and called for justice, believing that her voice was being silenced and her personal experience manipulated for public spectacle. Others, however, began to question the timing and intent behind her claims. They wondered whether Blake's statements were designed to influence public perception ahead of a more substantive legal outcome. Many observers pointed out that without concrete evidence naming Baldoni directly the allegations might not hold up under scrutiny, the legal world also began to weigh in. Attorneys and analysts began appearing on podcast panels and YouTube breakdowns, giving their opinions on the severity of the accusations and whether or not Justin Baldoni could be held responsible for a leak if it even occurred. As described, some experts noted that in high-profile cases like this, information often finds its way to the public through a variety of unofficial channels, and it is notoriously difficult to trace those leaks back to a single person without hard proof. Still, the damage was done. The story had taken on a life of its own, and Justin Baldoni's name was now tied to one of the most serious accusations one can face in a legal battle involving privacy and integrity. It became clear that if he wanted to preserve his name, his brand, and his position in the ongoing proceedings, he would need to respond not just through lawyers but directly to the public, and that is exactly what he did. In the days that followed the allegation, Baldoni's team began to signal that a response was coming. They made no official statement right away, choosing instead to prepare a carefully crafted rebuttal, one that would not only address the specific claims made against him, but also challenge the entire narrative that had been spun by media outlets and online commentators. Then the moment arrived, and Justin Baldoni spoke publicly for the first time about the matter. When Justin Baldoni finally spoke out, his words carried the weight of someone who had stayed silent for too long and was ready to set the record straight. The moment was charged with emotion and intensity, not just because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Calm, measured, but firm, his tone conveyed both hurt and frustration, and for many it marked a major turning point in the unfolding drama. He began by addressing the allegations head-on, rejecting the suggestion that he or anyone from his team had leaked Blake Lively's deposition details. He was clear and direct, stating that he had nothing to gain by sharing confidential legal information and everything to lose. He explained that the values he had spent years promoting through his work on screen and in real life left no room for deception, manipulation, or the exploitation of others. Baldoni went on to say that the situation had gone beyond a professional disagreement. It had become personal, not just for him, but for his family, friends, and supporters, who had watched in silence as his name was dragged through headlines that, in his words, were built on speculation, not fact. He stated that staying quiet had allowed too many assumptions to flourish, and it was time to push back against the narrative being spun in the public domain. One of the most striking moments in his statement was when he dared Blake Lively to show the evidence. If she truly believed he had leaked her deposition, he asked her directly to present the proof to stop the insinuations and be honest with the public. This was not said in anger, but in challenge, a challenge rooted in the belief that the truth would ultimately vindicate him. Public reaction to Baldoni's statement was immediate and intense. The internet lit up with support, outrage, curiosity, and analysis. Thousands of fans rallied behind him, believing his calm response reflected integrity and control. Others felt the drama had reached a new peak and were eager to see how Blake Lively would respond, if at all. Legal commentators observed that Baldoni's response was carefully constructed. It did not attack Lively personally, nor did it deny the seriousness of her allegations. Instead, it emphasized facts, transparency, and the need for accountability on both sides. By daring Blake to show evidence, he effectively turned the spotlight back toward her, suggesting that if she truly had proof, it was time to put it forward and let the world see the truth. Meanwhile, journalists and media outlets picked up every word, dissecting his speech line by line. Some focused on the strength of his challenge, while others pointed out that emotional sincerity does not necessarily equal innocence. Yet even critics admitted that Baldoni's composed and articulate delivery helped shift public perception, or at the very least gave him a stronger position in the ongoing narrative war. Social media was once again a battlefield. Fans split between those who believed Baldoni's words were genuine and those who still stood firmly behind Blake Lively. Hashtags in support of both stars trended simultaneously, and reaction videos flooded YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. Influencers posted commentary, some applauding Baldoni's courage, others accusing him of gaslighting. The drama had escalated far beyond the original allegations, and now it was a full-scale public confrontation, one where truth, perception, media influence, and legal strategy were colliding in real time. And for the millions watching, it was no longer just about who leaked a deposition. It was about who could be trusted, who was telling the truth, and what this battle meant for the broader conversations about celebrity power, gender dynamics, and public accountability. And as the dust began to settle from Justin's first statement, all eyes turned toward Blake Lively once again wondering if she would respond, how she would respond, and whether this war of words was only just beginning following Justin Baldoni's public challenge. All eyes turned back to Blake Lively. The pressure to respond was mounting, and the media frenzy intensified by the hour. While the world waited for her side of the story, many expected a quick and decisive statement, something that would either refute Baldoni's response or double down on the accusations that had ignited the conflict. But instead what followed was silence. No press release, no social media post, no comment from her legal team, and no interview to clarify or defend her position. And in the ever fast pace of Hollywood, silence can be as powerful as speech, because when a celebrity stays quiet during a storm, the world is left to fill in the blanks. For many observers, Blake Lively's silence became the subject of speculation. Was it a strategic move? Was she being advised by her legal counsel to avoid making public statements, or was the absence of a rebuttal an unintended confirmation of what Baldoni had said? Either way, it created a vacuum of information, and in that space, public perception began to shift. News outlets began to pivot their coverage. Instead of painting Baldoni as the possible wrongdoer, they started questioning the narrative that had originally cast him in that role. Some columnists even wondered aloud if Blake Lively had overreached with her accusation, or if perhaps there was more to the story than what had been made public so far. In online spaces, the conversation became even more divided. Some fans of Blake insisted that she was simply choosing not to engage in public drama, and that her silence was a show of strength. They argued that not every accusation needs to be publicly debated, especially if it is part of an ongoing legal case. Others, however, started expressing doubts, asking why someone who had been so vocal about the leak would suddenly fall quiet when asked to present evidence. The silence also opened the door for others to speak out. Legal experts began appearing on talk shows, podcasts, and live streams, giving their opinions on what this silence could mean. Several lawyers noted that while it is common for individuals involved in legal disputes to avoid public comment once accusations go public, some kind of clarification is typically offered, even if brief or non-committal. The lack of response from Blake's side, they said, was unusual and potentially damaging to her position. As the days turned into weeks without a public statement from Blake Lively, the attention began to shift away from the original allegations and toward the broader question of narrative control. In celebrity culture, who gets to shape the story? How much truth is revealed and how much is carefully managed behind closed doors? Justin Baldoni continued to stay visible during this time, attending events and interviews, while remaining largely measured in his comments about the dispute. When asked about Blake's silence, he declined to speculate, instead reiterating his desire for transparency and fairness, and reminding the public that he had no intention of letting misinformation define his character or legacy. This approach further solidified support for Baldoni among neutral observers. Many felt he had taken the high road, choosing dialogue over destruction and logic over anger, and as a result, his public image began to recover in meaningful ways. Despite the controversy, he appeared calm, respectful, and grounded, three qualities that resonated deeply with viewers tired of chaotic celebrity feuds. Meanwhile, the silence from Blake Lively's side remained unbroken, and as it stretched longer, it began to speak louder than any words possibly could. It suggested hesitation, uncertainty, or perhaps something even more calculated. But whatever the reason, the impact was clear. Public momentum had started to shift, and Justin Baldoni was no longer the only one under the microscope. Following Justin Baldoni's public challenge, all eyes turned back to Blake Lively. The pressure to respond was mounting, and the media frenzy intensified by the hour. While the world waited for her side of the story, many expected a quick and decisive statement, something that would either refute Baldoni's response or double down on the accusations that had ignited the conflict. But instead what followed was silence. No press release, no social media post, no comment from her legal team, and no interview to clarify or defend her position. And in the ever fast pace of Hollywood, silence can be as powerful as speech, because when a celebrity stays quiet during a storm, the world is left to fill in the blanks. For many observers, Blake Lively's silence became the subject of speculation. Was it a strategic move? Was she being advised by her legal counsel to avoid making public statements, or was the absence of a rebuttal an unintended confirmation of what Baldoni had said? Either way, it created a vacuum of information, and in that space, public perception began to shift. News outlets began to pivot their coverage. Instead of painting Baldoni as the possible wrongdoer, they started questioning the narrative that had originally cast him in that role. Some columnists even wondered aloud if Blake Lively had overreached with her accusation, or if perhaps there was more to the story than what had been made public so far in online spaces, the conversation became even more divided. Some fans of Blake insisted that she was simply choosing not to engage in public drama, and that her silence was a show of strength. They argued that not every accusation needs to